After the four men changed into bathrobes, Marco ordered to Lorena that Chanty be taken to her room first to change her clothes, because even she couldn't describe how dirty her clothes were, although they were not torn. Justin also told her to rest for a while and that they would talk later after lunch because she needed rest after the intense battle with Vasper Mondragon. She didn't speak, she was just silent. In fact, she was in a daze. Lorena supported her, walking slowly down the corridor, because she felt her knees were still shaking. The four men who remained in the living room watched her with concern evident on their faces. To enter her room, Lorena quietly assisted her, no longer asking many questions. It seemed she was allowing her to be at peace and not add to her emotional burden, not just emotional but even the physical aspect that drains energy. Upon entering the room, Lorena took care of the bathtub, preparing everything she needed for her bath. After everything was ready, Lorena asked if she wanted tea, to which she nodded gently. Pity was evident on Lorena's face. They just looked at each other, knowing that Lorena was avoiding asking about what happened, so she quickly averted her gaze, bowed her head, and excused herself to leave. She didn't feel any pain in her body, except for the trembling of her knees and muscles. The fear didn't go away, and the memories left by Vasper lingered. She never thought she would face Vasper in person, especially since she never imagined that he would be the first man to kiss her. The kiss of an enemy. Why was fate so cruel in her life? What did she do to deserve such a play of fate? Tears fell as she approached the large mirror in front of the bathtub. No sobs could be heard in her crying, only tears flowing down her cheeks. She stared at herself in the mirror, naked, touched her lips, the first kiss, from the man responsible for her father's demise. But deep in her mind, the memory of Vasper's lips touching hers, his embrace, lingered. Why did he smell so good? Is that how an enemy smells? Why couldn't she shake off those thoughts? She was ashamed of herself. Is this really happening? Why did his lips searching for her smell so good? She felt at that moment as if her strength was being siphoned, her body weakening. All her memories seemed like watching television. Was that Vasper's way of taking and learning about her past and personality? He is your enemy, Chanty. Don't forget what he did to your father, she whispered to herself. She stared at herself in the mirror for a long time before starting to shower. She stayed under the cold shower for a while, hoping to wash away the memories of facing Vasper. After the shower, she soaked in the bathtub prepared by Lorena, savoring the fragrant essential oils mixed in the water. She soaked in the bathtub for a long time, oblivious to the passing time, until she heard a knock on the door, knowing it was Lorena. Probably bringing her tea. She wasn't wrong. It was Lorena who entered with the tea, carefully stepping in and approaching her, as she hadn't closed the bathroom door. She signaled to place the tea near the bathtub within her reach. Lorena did just that and then excused herself to leave. She nodded and thanked her. After dressing, she left the room because she knew it was lunchtime, and she didn't want to mope inside. Despite her reluctance, she needed to face her life's problems and find answers to the questions in her mind. Only her companions watching over her could answer those. What role do they play in her life? To protect her? Yes, but for how long? How will she defend herself when she's alone? How long will she hide from the Mondragons? Vasper made it clear he wasn't done and would return. She went straight to the dining table and saw Laura and Samuel preparing the food. They greeted her. After sitting down, she waited for the four men to arrive. Samuel said he had called Justin and the two guests. So, she waited to meet the four. Soon, Jacob arrived, followed by Gabriel and Marco. Justin was absent. Jacob stared at her intently, seemingly assessing her emotional and physical state. She knew her companions were worried about her. I'm okay now, though not 100% yet. For now, I'm okay, she said, preempting their questions about her well-being after everything. The three of them stared at her. She worried more seeing the injuries on their faces and arms from the battle with Vasper. They probably had injuries on their bodies too. If it weren't for their powers, they might not have survived. Thank you for saving me. I saw how skilled you are in battle and your powers. It seemed impossible, but I saw everything. Although it feels like a nightmare, it's all real, she said softly, knowing they heard her clearly. They exchanged looks before returning their gaze to her. We've been doing this for a long time, Chanty, not just now, but especially now. We've faced Vasper before and his family, like his sister who attacked your mansion, Marco said firmly. But Vasper is stronger now, like a combination of Jake and David, Jacob added, staring at her. We can't hide anything from him now. She probably knows everything. When Vasper kissed you, he took all the information from your past and present. How much do you remember? Gabriel asked, referring to Vasper's kiss that made her relive her past. From when I regained consciousness until David left the house, she replied softly, stunned that Vasper knew her past. Does he know everything? She asked Gabriel. The three men sighed except for her. How did Vasper become so powerful? Let's eat first. We'll discuss this after, Marco suggested. Where is Justin? She asked. Justin went back to the forest to investigate something. He'll be back soon. Will your wounds heal quickly like Justin's? She asked worriedly, looking at their faces and wounds. She knew Marco could heal himself, so her question was for Jacob and Gabriel. These are nothing compared to the anger we'll face from David when he returns. Vasper almost got you, Chanty. He could have taken you in an instant because he had you, but he didn't. He must have a reason. We wondered why he didn't take you. He has teleportation powers like Jake. Why did he leave you? That's what we don't understand, Gabriel said. Jacob stared at her, his gaze penetrating deeply, as if conveying a message. She couldn't hold Jacob's stare and looked down. Gabriel noticed this and stared at Jacob's eyes, as if they were communicating. Marco continued eating. While eating, she thought about Gabriel's words. Why did Vasper leave her? He had the chance to take her but didn't. Instead, he just threatened to return. When we're inside the house or within David's perimeter, you're safe, Jacob explained. There's a shield here, made by David's parents, so Vasper and his kind can't enter. The lampposts around the area aren't ordinary, they provide protection for the surroundings and the house. No evil minions can get in, which is why David doesn't let us go into the forest. Marco listened silently, his gaze fixed on her. So, can you guess how David will feel when he finds out about all this? About what happened today? Gabriel said with a laugh, looking at Marco. They fell silent for a moment while eating, and none of them made a noise until they finished their meal. Although she wanted to ask something, she chose to remain silent until they finished eating, and Samuel had cleared away their dishes. Then Marco suggested they go outside to the gazebo to talk seriously. They followed Marco's invitation, and once they were seated comfortably, she began to speak. I know why the Mondragons need my blood, she said directly in front of Marco. She stared seriously at Marco. Vasper told me that his father needs my blood to achieve immortality, she added. It felt like there was a lump in her throat as she mentioned it. She wanted to know the deep reasons behind Vasper's words. Now tell me, what kind of people are the Mondragons? Are they vampires? Why do they need my blood? What's different about my blood compared to other women like me and my age? Am I the only one like this? She added, hoping to get answers to her suspicions. The three men exchanged glances, trying to decide who would speak first and answer Shanta's questions. Your blood is unique, Chanty, a rare opportunity for them at a time when someone like you is alive. They have lived in this world for a long time, and because they reside here, they must follow the laws of nature, where no matter how long you live, the day will come when you will be taken by nature. Now, there is someone like you alive on the surface of this world, the only answer to defy the laws of nature, and that is your blood. But one thing they also avoid is being preempted by you. If you remain a virgin and enter their world and manage to get close to their king, Vasper's father, and stab him in the chest with the sword of destiny, he will disappear from the surface of this world along with his minions. People will live peacefully in this world if that happens. It depends on who goes first. You or him? Jacob explained at length. Finally, he was able to reveal all the truth to Shanta that she needed to know. She fell silent at what she heard, unable to believe Jacob's words. Was she hearing correctly? Her gaze shifted between the three men, not knowing how shocked she was by the revelations. What should she say? Where is the world of the Mondragons? Even now, one of the Mondragons seemed hard to fight. What more if she were in the world of the Mondragons? How could she do it? How could she get close to Vasper's father? Could she do what Jacob said? She couldn't even defend herself. She was defenseless. Only virgin blood has the power to end his life, and not just any blood, but blood like yours. You come into their lives only once, so this is their chance. And that is what we will not allow to happen. If they achieve their desire in our world, they will rule this world, Chanty. They live on the blood of virgins, their family, not just anyone's blood. But their minions will take any blood they desire. You know what they are, our world would become a literal hell. We will not let that happen. It seems to be our family's curse to be involved in such a situation. We hide from the eyes of the ordinary humans, concealing our true nature. Vasper is the eldest son, the heir to their kingdom, so you see that his abilities are not ordinary, but it was his sibling who caused the burning of your mansion. I just wonder why Vasper left you, when it was his chance. Does he have other plans? Marco asked, puzzled, as he explained to her. That's why we're here, to make sure you do what you need to do. We're here to protect you and keep you safe as long as we can. Even if it costs us our lives, Gabriel said. Where do you come from? How were you formed? Your group? What is my identity? I don't know myself now because of what you're saying. She was on the verge of tears while looking at Marco and Jacob, because of the confusion in her mind. Where on earth are the Mondragons? Is what you're saying possible, Jacob? I don't have the ability to do that, even you, with powers, only managed to wound Vasper. How can I approach his father? I can't even imagine entering their world. Are you joking? And what is this sword of destiny you speak of? Where can I find it? I can only handle a bow and arrow. My father trained me in that, and I can handle a gun. We always practice. Just for the sake of learning his skills, that's all I can do for self-defense, and all of that is useless if I'm facing the Mondragons. Will they be affected by that? Don't joke with me like this. My father never told me anything about this, she said, tears starting to fall. I can't even move when I'm inside of Vasper's invisible barrier, she added with sarcastic laugh amidst her tears. Why was fate suddenly making fun of her with impossible things and knowledge? Why me? She asked amid her crying and sobbing. It was heartbreaking for Jacob to watch Shanta's condition. He wanted to hug her. He just restrained himself. He knew that if he gave in to his feelings, everyone would know his sentiments for the woman in front of him. He just looked away, avoiding watching her cry. His fists were clenched, and Gabriel saw this, knowing what Jacob felt for Chanty. Marco and Gabriel exchanged glances and let out a deep sigh. What else could they say? Would they add to Shanta's suffering? So it was better to remain silent. They would tell her the other information next time, little by little, slowly until she understood everything. She sobbed as she stood up. I'll go inside the house for now. I'll leave you now, she said firmly, and slowly walked away from the gazebo, leaving the three men, silently looking at each other. She entered the house, and went straight to her room. From a distance, Justin saw everything. He was just watching from afar, but could hear the conversation in the gazebo. He had just returned from the forest. He saw Chanty return to the house, and although he felt sorry for her, there was nothing he could do. They all had to go through it. It was part of their sworn duty, for the greater good. He knew that someday Chanty would understand everything, even if the process was painful. Gabriel, come here, he whispered softly, knowing Gabriel could hear him. He was near the horse stable, checking if the horses were okay after returning from their battle with Vasper. Fortunately, the horses were safe but traumatized, so he temporarily tied them up, including Jake's horse, Jay, because they were agitated when they saw him. They were also affected by what happened. And soon, he saw the three men behind him, waiting for what he would say. We need Lewis, Justin said earnestly to the three men before him. I've spotted a trace of Vasper's blood in the forest. That's enough for us to pinpoint Vasper and his sister's location if they're nearby. His voice carried the weight of urgency. Let's get ahead of them before they execute their plans, he added with determination. Why didn't he take Chanty? What's his plan? Marco inquired, his brow furrowed in confusion. I'm not sure, Gabriel replied, his tone somber. But I do know that Vasper has grown stronger, especially his teleportation power. He slips through our grasp in mere seconds. Despite our trio's efforts, he escaped. Only Jake can chase him down at this point, Gabriel stated, a hint of concern in his voice. David called, they're returning tonight. I've informed him about the earlier incident. He's furious with me. Be prepared for whatever plan David has in store when they arrive. We'll act then. We shouldn't wait for Vasper to summon his forces to confront us here. Thankfully, there was no forest fire earlier, otherwise, hiding from the public would have become even more challenging. Many would discover this property. Vasper is indeed adept at tracking his prey. We need 2 people outside and 2 inside the house to keep watch. He might return unexpectedly, Justin added, scanning the surroundings with a strategic eye. Jacob and I will take the outside, Gabriel volunteered, stepping forward with resolve. We'll discuss further once David arrives. Justin and Marco entered the house and found Lorena in the living room. She quickly mentioned that Chanty had locked herself in, seemingly preferring solitude over company. Justin nodded in understanding and advised Lorena to let Chanty be and not to disturb her. Lorena nodded, grasping the gravity of the situation. David will be home later. Knock on Chanty's door only after his arrival, Justin instructed, and Lorena acknowledged the command from her master with a respectful nod. As night came, 3 cars arrived, and they were David's. Chanty heard their arrival. She fixed herself in front of the mirror, trying to see if her eyes looked swollen from crying. She went out to meet David and find out what news he had for her. Hurriedly, she went out to the balcony and descended to the front yard to locate the garage. She noticed a hidden entrance in the right wall leading underground where the cars were parked. She realized that David's garage was cleverly designed to be underground. David's house is smartly designed, she thought. Waiting outside, she saw many expensive cars inside, likely owned by David. Shortly after, David, Jake, and Louis emerged from the garage. The 3 handsome men greeted her seriously, especially Jake and David. Jake's gaze seemed fixed on her. David hugged her and immediately asked, "Are you okay, Chanty?" "Please forgive Justin for what he did, you were almost in danger," David said, looking behind her. She hadn't noticed Justin was behind her. They exchanged glances, their eyes speaking volumes. No words were spoken, but she felt David holding back his emotions. Jake walked away, purposely bumping into Justin's shoulder. Justin remained quiet, seemingly restraining himself from reacting to Jake. Justin just smiled sarcastically as Jake entered the house without looking back. They all sensed what Jake did. David glanced at Justin. David observed the faces, wounds, and bruises of the 4 men in front of him. He knew the ordeal the 4 men went through against Vasper was not easy. He understood that facing someone like Vasper was no simple task. "Let's talk inside, Chanty," David suggested. They all went inside. She noticed David carrying a black bag. He entered first, followed by the others. They found Jake sitting on the sofa, glaring at Justin. Fortunately, Justin seemed remorseful, knowing he was at fault. Jake remained silent but scrutinized the faces of the 4 men in front of him, clearly seeing the injuries on their faces and arms. Chanty felt tension between Jake and Justin. Would they fight? It was the first time she saw Jake looking angry. "Let's talk in my office, Chanty," David said. "Follow me." David led the way to the corridor towards his room, with Chanty following. The 6 men left in the living room just watched them go. The 6 men, silently exchanging glances with each other. Their companions knew that Jake and Justin were communicating telepathically, so they fell silent and carefully observed the expressions of the 2 who were silently exchanging hostile glances. "Jake, that's enough. We don't want what happened," Marco couldn't bear it anymore and interjected in the midst of the hostile exchange between Justin and Jake. He was used to Justin and Jake always arguing and being at odds, but this time was different, especially with Chanty being involved. Vasper didn't take Chanty even though he could have at that time since she was within his invisible barrier, but he chose to leave her behind, which puzzled us. Jacob, who was observing Jake, responded. Jake, in turn, looked back at him with a furrowed brow, knowing that Jake was also puzzled. Lewis, I saw blood in the forest that came from Vasper, so we can trace where he is. Justin also mentioned while facing Lewis that they knew Lewis was their group's tracker among the 7, especially skilled at locating Vasper using the blood trail. Let's get ahead of them because they might have reinforcements. But we can't leave Chanty unguarded, and we can't all attack Vasper together. Let's wait for David's decision on what to do. Gabriel responded. Vasper knows this place well. He's sure to bring companions to attack here. Marco added. Gabriel suddenly alerted, quickly rising from his seat. He looked at his companions, signaling them to be silent. His companions fell silent and slowly approached him, grasping his arm to listen to what Gabriel heard. The expressions on their faces showed surprise and alertness due to what they heard. Vasper heard them, and the 6 of them faced off, with Vasper calling for Chanty. In anger, Jake and Jacob swiftly left David's house like lightning bolts in their movements, using their powers to quickly reach Vasper's location. If there was a deadly gaze, it was none other than from Jacob and Jake's eyes, facing Vasper's gaze. The 3 of them stood face to face. Vasper smiled, but it was a smile of an adversary. He knew that his opponent's anger could not be measured due to their previous conflict. With a slight tension, they waited to see who would make the first move, but Vasper stood still, focusing on Jake and Jacob. Why are you here? What is your purpose? What's your game, Vasper? Jake asked, his teeth clenched in anger. Jacob felt an even stronger urge to punch Vasper in the face, especially as he remembered Vasper kissing Chanty. But he restrained himself so that Vasper could still respond to Jake's question. Vasper suddenly laughed, which made Jacob even angrier. In his rage, Jacob showered Vasper with punches, not stopping as he grabbed Vasper's collar. With Jacob's powerful punch came an equally forceful shout, while Jake let Jacob have his moment of attack on Vasper, understanding Jacob's rage not just from their long-standing encounters with Vasper. But he was on alert, ready to step in if Jacob was in any danger. With the force of Jacob's punches, Vasper's shirt tore, but Vasper just let Jacob attack without fighting back. Instead, Vasper's laughter grew louder, a laugh that was infuriating. Jacob's anger intensified, and he landed a punch on Vasper's face that sent him flying far away. The impact of Jacob's attack caused many trees in the forest to fall, accompanied by blue flames coming from his hands. Jake immediately followed to see where Vasper had landed. When Jake and Jacob reached Vasper, they saw him getting up with a grin, a wound on his face, and his torn shirt. But he stood up, showing his strength despite the power of Jacob's attack. He looked at them sharply. Then David and Marco, Jake's companions, arrived. They stood around Vasper, surrounding him. The enemy was in the middle, and they were all ready to attack. Vasper, I'm impressed with your courage, coming here all by yourself. You're very brave, Vasper, you know we're all here, right? So bold of you, to come without any backup. Or do you underestimate our abilities? Is that why you came alone? You won't last until tomorrow if you truly face us now, Vasper, said David, his teeth clenched and his fists ready to unleash on the enemy, but he waited for Vasper to speak to them. Vasper just laughed as he faced David, wiping the blood from his lip. But his piercing stares to the men surrounding him. Tomorrow, they will come to take Chanty. My father can't wait to have Chanty, David. If you're doing your job, don't delay any longer and get Chanty away from here, hide her so my sister can't follow. If Lewis is your best tracker, my sister is no less. She has recovered from what Jake did, and she's very angry with you, Jake, Vasper said with a taunt in his voice, facing Jake. If you're busy fighting my sister and her companions tomorrow, who will watch over Chanty? You're not sure how strong your perimeter is. That's all I came here for, he added. The men surrounding were puzzled, looking at David, wondering why Vasper was warning them. What did this mean for them? Was Vasper playing with them? Vasper, what's your intention in giving us a warning? What's your game? For what? Does your sister know why you're here? We're not fools to believe your stories. What do you think of us? We don't have brains? To believe you right away? Jake shouted back at Vasper. It doesn't matter to me whether you believe me or not, just remember my words, David, Vasper replied, looking straight into David's eyes. And suddenly, Vasper disappeared from their sight. Chanty was crying, holding a jar containing her father's ashes, which David had given her. She was looking at pictures taken by David of her mansion that had burned down. Nothing was left of her house except the concrete foundations. Everything was burned, including the wide stables for their horses and the guest house. She couldn't believe what remained after the fire. And what was left was the strawberries inside the refrigerator that her father had bought. David remembered the strawberries that her father had bought, which she had planned to make into a cake. The strawberries were placed on the table beside her bed, and her tears kept falling as she uttered her father's name. She hugged the jar, crying. She missed her father. Her feelings were mixed with worry because of David's hurried departure due to Vasper's sudden appearance. Vasper had returned, and that's where David had gone, into the forest. Her sadness was mixed with concern for her companions. She placed the jar beside her bed on the side table, and David had promised that they would give a proper tribute to the placement of her father's ashes. Suddenly, Vasper appeared before her, and in her fear, she let out a soft scream. Her eyes widened in shock, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Vasper's gaze locked with hers, only a small space between them, close enough for her to breathe in his scent. She could feel the warmth of his body, and his eyes were filled with pity as he looked at her. The most beautiful, handsome man she had ever seen stood before her, yet he was also her enemy. Vasper had a wound on his face, likely from a fight with David. She thought. What should she do? Should she scream for Justin and the others to hear her? But she didn't. They just looked at each other, their eyes seemingly having a conversation. She wasn't paralyzed like the last time Vasper had done this to her. Suddenly, Vasper embraced her waist and kissed her, a kiss that weakened her body, draining the strength from her knees. The scent of Vasper's breath and his kisses brought back memories of their fight in the forest until now. When Vasper released her lips, he looked into her eyes with a mix of surprise, wiping away her tears with his warm palms. She didn't understand why she was letting Vasper do this to her. Was she under some magic spell of his? Vasper caressed her cheek and hair, his eyes filled with pity. Vasper still held her waist. Tomorrow, my sister Lyca will come, and she's after you, he said in almost a whisper but loud enough for her to hear clearly. Don't stay here because many will attack tomorrow. If David doesn't move you tonight, I will take you, so my sister can't have you. He continued, looking into her eyes seriously. She will take you to my father, and I don't want that to happen. Don't delay any longer. Vasper said and kissed her quickly again, looked into her eyes, and suddenly disappeared from her sight. For a few seconds, she couldn't move, just stood there stunned, unable to even blink, wondering if she was dreaming or not. She only moved when the door suddenly opened abruptly, and Louis and Justin burst in. Vasper! Louis exclaimed, looking at her. He was here inside the house. We felt his presence, added Justin. She felt like she had just woken up from sleep, looking at the two men at her bedroom door but unable to speak. The two men understood the expression on her face and approached her, helping her out of the room. She walked slowly because she was just starting to feel her knees shaking.